Hello and welcome to my channel. In this video, we will be covering chapter number 12, Regulatory Environment. This video is part of NISM Investment Advisor playlist. So I recommend you to please go through the playlist. You'll find many more videos already uploaded. You can get the link to the playlist on the I button at the end of this video as well as in the description box. Now let's start with this one. If you like the video, do hit the like button and please do not forget to subscribe to the channel. That would really motivate me to continue working. Regulation for investment advisors. So, as I mentioned in the title that this video is going to be about the regulatory environment. Till now, in different chapters, we have covered various aspects of investment advisory. Now we will be looking at the regulatory authority, and it becomes very important because when you are an investment advisor, you are providing advices to the client on various financial products, which is mutual funds, which can be insurances, which can be shares, debentures, then it can be gold, real estates, etc. So there are n number of financial products that can form a part of the portfolio that you are recommending to your client. Now we need to know that what all compliances need to be followed, and those financial products, how are they regulated, which one is the regulatory authority governing the framework of those financial products or of those financial particular areas. So we need to know that. Now, also we would be addressing one more important question that many of the students has asked, that after completing this particular certification, how can we register ourselves as an investment advisor, or what exactly is the eligibility criteria? So that would also be answered in this video, and you'll get to know that what all is the qualification, the eligibility that is required if you want to work as an investment advisor. So starting with the basic meaning of investment advice. Now, investment advice is any form of advice through which you are informing or guiding your client to invest in a particular financial product. Now, you may give recommendations or advices related to things like when to buy or sell a particular financial product, what is the price of that particular asset or financial product going in the market, the overall market scenario, where to invest money, where to allocate money, the total portfolio diversification. So there can be many such recommendations or advices. Investment advisory is a broader area which covers various things. Now, investment advisor just not advises only on like recommendations to invest in a particular stock. They also provide they can also provide advices on saving patterns, on the budget allocation, the insurance need, the tax planning, estate planning. So all these things can be involved under the aspect of investment advisory. And then if we talk about certain bankers or stockbrokers or financial planners, they are usually involved in providing investment advices. Now that's due to their profession, that they have to provide certain investment advices to their customers. Usually see what happens that the investment advisors, they charge an annual fee of around 1 to 2% on the investment amount of their client. So if they are holding a particular investment amount, for example of rupees 1 crore of a particular client, so an annual fees of about 1% will be like around 1 lakh rupees for that particular investment advisor. So many investment advisor, they charge a certain percent which is ranging between 1 to 2% of the investment amount of the client per year. Okay. Now let's have a look at this line. However, advice that is widely available to the public through newspapers or internet or magazines is not considered as investment advice under the regulations. Okay, so there are certain advertisements made, or there are certain freely available advices on the internet. Those advices are not charged, and that's not considered as the actual investment advisory for which you need to get yourself registered. That's covering a whole public in large. Okay, so that's something that is not considered as investment advice under regulation. For example, there are many YouTubers who are providing advices related to investments in different stocks, mutual funds, etc. Now, they don't charge fee, they don't charge you anything for those advices. It's freely available to the large public. If you have the trust, if you have followed them, and if you think that the recommendation was totally correct, you keep on following them and you keep on taking the advices without paying any charges. So there are certain areas where these advices or these investment recommendations are provided for free through newspapers, internet, or magazines. That's not within the investment advisory regulations. Coming to qualification and capital requirement. So we were talking about the eligibility that is required if you want to work as an investment advisor. So let's have a look at what exactly would be the qualification and the capital requirement. So the regulations specify certain minimum qualifications for a person to be eligible to known as an investment advisor. A graduate in any discipline with an experience of at least 5 years in activities relating to advice in financial products. So you may be a graduate only, but if you have an experience of at least 5 years working in any financial firm recommending about financial products as such, you can be considered to be registered as an investment advisor. Second, you can be a professional, you can have a professional qualification or a postgraduate degree or postgraduate diploma in finance, accountancy, business management, commerce, economics, capital market, banking, insurance, or actuarial science. So all these areas, if you are having a professional qualification or a postgraduate degree in these particular fields or a master's degree as well, you can be considered, you can get yourself registered as an investment advisor. An investment advisor must obtain valid certification from NISM. Fresh certification must be obtained before expiry of the validity of existing certification. Okay, so this was your basic educational qualification that is required if you want to get yourself registered as an investment advisor. But along with this, either you are graduate with 5 years of experience or you are having a postgraduate degree in any of these financial courses, you can be considered eligible. And after that, you must have a valid certification from NISM. So that's why we are studying about this, the NISM investment advisor level 1 and level 2 certifications. If you are having these valid certifications, you can get yourself registered. You can have the registration number which authorizes you to provide investment advices either by working individually or by working for any firm. Now you must notice that these certifications are having a validity period. So this NISM investment advisor certification is valid for only 3 years. So after 3 years, you need to have the renewal of your certifications by giving a exam with updated syllabus. Okay. For investment advisors which are body corporate shall have net worth of not less than 25 lakhs. Investment advisors who are individuals or partnership firms shall have net tangible assets of value not less than 1 lakh. So these things need to be considered. If you are a company, you need to have a net worth which is not less than 25 lakhs if you are going into the business of investment advisory and getting yourself registered for it. If you are an individual or a partnership firm, you need to have a net tangible assets which is not less than 1 lakh. Now, why is this requirement of a particular certification or educational criteria or about this particular amount of money? This is to ensure financial stability and financial knowledge if you are getting into the field of investment advisory, because you would be dealing with clients, you would be providing recommendations and advices. So you must have proper knowledge. Whatever you would be suggesting to someone, there would be money involved, and money is very precious to anyone, so no one would like to lose it and let it go in wrong hands. So you must have the right financial knowledge. Along with that, to safeguard in any emergency situation, you must have certain net worth, certain capital available, certain tangible assets. So that's why this minimum requirement of 1 lakh and 25 lakh has been specified. Let's have look at exemptions from registrations. Now there are certain professions which by their means they provide investment advices to their customers or clients. So they do not need to get themselves registered under this NISM and get the registration number to work in this particular field. So let's have a look at these exceptions. First one is any person who gives general comments on financial trends, economic situation which is not stock or product specific. Okay, so if there is any person who is giving any general comment, that should not be an investment advisor, and one should not have to get the registration done to provide any advices. Anyone is allowed to give general comments or any advice to anyone unless you are not working as a serious profession and charging fee for it. Second is any insurance agents or brokers providing investment advice only in insurance product registered under IRDAI. So if there are insurance agents who are providing you advices related which insurance policy you should choose, they are providing you a certain investment advice or insurance advice in one way or other, but they do not need to get themselves registered because they are already registered under the act of IRDAI. IRDAI is Insurance Regulatory Development Authority of India. This is the regulatory authority governing the insurance market of our country. So these agents are already registered under IRDAI, and hence they are having this right to provide the advices related to insurance, and they do not need to get themselves again registered for investment advisory as such. Then there are pension advisors offering investment advice only on pension products. So again, as I mentioned, that there are certain professions which by their way they provide advices to their customers, because customers will go, they would be asking that okay, I have to choose one policy. They are having certain requirements, but they do not know which product to go with. So insurance agents will recommend that this insurance policy will be good for you. The pension advisors will recommend that this particular pension product, NPS or this mutual fund pension scheme, here you should invest. So pension advisors will giving advice on pension products. They do not need to again get registered under investment advisory because they are already regulated under PFRDA. PFRDA is Pension Fund Regulatory Development Authority. Again, this is the regulatory authority in our country governing the pension market. So these pension advisors are already regulated and registered under PFRDA, so they are exempted from registrations as an investment advisor. Any distributor of mutual fund regulated as a member of AMFI. Now, mutual fund distributors who are providing advices on which mutual fund scheme would be better for their client, they are registered. They are registered and they form a part. They form a they are member of AMFI, which is Association of Mutual Fund in India. Okay, so these mutual fund distributors, they are members of this SRO, that is self regulatory organization called as AMFI, Association of Mutual Funds in India. Again, AMFI is the regulatory authority which would be looking after the mutual fund distributors and the people involved in this mutual fund particular area. So they are already regulated and registered and forms a member of this association. Stockbroker, portfolio manager, merchant bankers registered under SEBI. So if there are stockbrokers, managers or merchant bankers who are providing advices on trading activities in shares, debentures or currencies or derivatives, etc., they are already registered under SEBI. SEBI is Securities and Exchange Board of India, governing our capital market. So again, they are exempted from registration. Advocates, solicitors or law firms, member of ICAI, ICSI and ICWA. So again, these are professional qualifications. This ICAI is Institute of Chartered Accountants of India, ICSI is Institute of Company Secretaries of India, and ICWA is Institute of Cost Work and Accountants of India. Now these are certain professional qualifications and they are having their own regulatory authority and they are registered under that. So if they are providing any advices related to their field in terms of tax planning, in terms of legal advices, so they are exempted from registration under this. Obligations and responsibilities of investment advisor. So first one is conflict of interest. An investment advisor should always try to avoid any kind of conflicts of interest between him and the client. So many a times it can happen that the investment advisor wants to build a certain portfolio which the client does not agree with. Now in that case, the advisor should try to make the client understand that how this particular portfolio construction will help him achieve his financial goal and how this is the best possible solution. So to avoid any kind of conflict in the thoughts, in the understanding. Only advisory income. Investment advisor should be responsible enough to accept the advisory income which he charges in terms of a certain percentage of the investment portfolio or maybe the profit as decided. So only that should be claimed by the investment advisor. No extra gain, no extra gift from the client should be accepted, because then that would be that would be a kind of there would be a kind of biasness with other clients if one client is trying to pamper and provide gifts. So that becomes like that is not good for the profession, and that is not good for the profession in whole. So any other gifts, any other such thing shall be avoided. Only the advisory income shall be taken into consideration by the investment advisor. Okay. Third is confidentiality. Confidentiality means all the informations about the client which the advisor is having should be kept confidential or secret. Okay, because that's related to personal financial informations, and that is not to be disclosed to other companies or in public, so that should be kept confidential. Then KYC compliance. KYC is know your customer. Now there is certain documents that is required under the KYC compliance, and it is all mentioned under the regulatory authority which is governing these compliances. So any kind of income proof, address proof, identity proof, or the forms that is being filled up in terms to gain informations about the client, that should all be done, and the process need to be followed related to KYC. Code of conduct need to be followed, because as I mentioned that these investment advisors are dealing with various financial products which belongs to different financial markets. So there are shares and equities which belongs to capital market. There are certain fixed deposits and all which belong under the which belongs under money market and is governed by RBI. Then there is mutual funds which forms a part under the AMFI, which is looking after it. So all these things where different financial products, different financial markets are involved, there are certain code of conduct also being provided that need to be followed, and it becomes much more complicated to keep an eye on all the compliances. Reporting to SEBI, again, this is a mandatory thing to be done. There should be reports made to SEBI, that is Securities and Exchange Board of India, which is the regulatory authority of capital market. Reports need to be submitted regarding all these portfolios and the clients, etc. Risk profiling. Risk profiling and assessment becomes important to get information about the client in terms of his or her risk perspective. Okay, so maybe a certain client is willing to take more risk. There may be clients who are risk averse and they don't want to take higher risk in their investments. So there are different types of clients who are ready for high risk, moderate risk, or lower risk. You need to consider the interest of the client. Along with that, you also need to consider that what is the profile of your client, which life stage he is going through, what is his investment objective, what is his income, the loans that he has taken, how many family members are dependent on his income. Considering all these factors, you can make a choice that what would be the certain risk percentage that the client is ready to avail or which won't affect his family budget at all. Okay, so risk profiling need to be done in a proper manner. Suitability, again, this need to be client specific. Whatever you are making recommendation should not be in your favor as an investment advisor, but you need to consider what exactly the client is looking for. What is his financial goal? What is the amount of risk that he is ready to take? And if any suggestions has to be made, you need to discuss that with the client and then provide a suitable option of investment. Disclosures to clients. So all material information about the stock or the company in which the investment has been made, the risk related, how was the past performance of certain financial assets in which you have invested the client's money, that all informations need to be communicated with the client. You need to show what all stocks have been included in the portfolio, how was the performance, how it is going to help the client. If the client need all these details, you need to provide it. Even if the client is not aware about all this, you need to communicate with the client to keep a transparency in the profession. Now, any kind of warning or disclaimers that you have seen in the advertisements, like in the advertisement of mutual fund, it is always mentioned that mutual funds investments are subject to market risk. Please read all the documents carefully. So that's a kind of warning and disclaimer, and that is also to be followed in this profession. You need to make your client well aware that there is risk involved and how that risk can affect the client's money. You don't need to hide the facts. Record maintenance. Okay, so record also need to be maintained by you as an investment advisor. You need to have a proper record related to the KYC details of your client, the portfolio of your clients, any agreement that you have made with the client. All these records and documentation shall be done in a proper way. Now let's come to code of conduct to investment advisor. So first one is honesty and fairness. Now this means that investment advisor shall act honestly and fairly in best interest of the client. Second is diligence. Investment advisor shall act with care and due diligence and provide all the advices after going through a proper analysis, so that you are doing your work and not just recommending anything that is not substantial to the client. You are making a proper analysis and then you are suggesting a particular portfolio. Capabilities. So the investment advisor should be capable enough. That's why we have seen the educational and the capital requirement that was mandated. So you need to have that particular financial knowledge and financial capability that you can deal with the client and you can help the client get good returns over the year and an efficient performance of the portfolio. Information about client. Investment advisor shall always try to seek information from the client regarding all his financial situations, regarding his financial goal or objective, any liability if it is there, the number of dependents on the client. So all these informations are really relevant before constructing a portfolio, so that you are having a fair idea about the client, the objective, the choices, the risk taking capability, the return expected, and then you can make a proper investment decision for your client. Information to its client. So as you are taking information from client, you also need to provide information to client with certain validation, like the portfolio that you have chose, the companies, the stocks, the mutual funds, the insurance, the tax, the e-state, whatever you are advising. You need to communicate with your client. Even if the client is not aware, you try to make communication in a very simple way to make him understand that how this portfolio is going to help the client, how his financial goal would be able to fulfill in the coming years. Okay. Fair and reasonable charges, as we already read in the obligations part, that the investment advisor should only claim their charges on investment advisory income, which can be a certain percentage of the portfolio of the client. So that need to be taken into consideration. Any kind of biasness should not be made because of certain clients paying you gifts or any extra amount of money. Don't do that. There should be fair practices maintained in investment advisory. Conflicts of interest should be avoided. We already talked about it. Compliance need to be followed. There are different regulatory authorities and certain code of conducts that are set. You need to go through all those compliances, and you need to understand that what all things need to be kept into consideration, because your client won't be aware about it. You need to have certain financial knowledge related to all those things so that you don't fall into legal matters. Responsibility of senior management: if you are working under senior management in any corporate, there is responsibility of senior management to have a look after the investment advisors and to see if the profession, if the work is going in a proper way. Coming to regulatory bodies, a regulatory body is a public organization or government agency that is set up to exercise a regulatory function. Now, if we talk about the major function that the regulatory bodies are looking after, is maintaining discipline in the financial market. Now, that's by imposing certain controls, certain restrictions, and by forming general code of conduct that need to be followed by the players who are involved in these markets, the intermediaries, the investors, or the brokers, the agents. All has to go through the compliance and to follow certain rules and regulations, and that becomes very important to avoid any kind of malpractices or misuse of the money, and so that there is trust engrossed in the capital as well as the money market for longer survival of the market. So that's why regulatory bodies becomes very important. Regulatory bodies cover a wide variety of professions, but not all professions are regulated and may be self-regulated. So we would come to know about certain self-regulatory organizations. A regulatory body might also be referred to as regulatory agency, a regulatory authority, or regulator in general terms. Now let's have a look after the Reserve Bank of India. The Reserve Bank of India is the central bank of India. It was originally set up as a private entity in 1935 but was nationalized in 1949. Reserve Bank of India is the regulatory authority of money market of India as well as the banks of India. Okay. The main purpose of RBI is to conduct consolidated supervision of financial sectors, which is made up of commercial bank institutions, financial institutions, and non-banking finance firms. Now we would try to understand it more through the functioning of Reserve Bank of India. That's how we can get a clearer picture. And one thing more is that you need to understand the gist and not go much in deep about these regulatory bodies. There may be certain questions just to test your knowledge that whether you are aware about the main functioning of these organizations or which market is controlled by these organizations or not. So starting with the issue of currency. Now RBI is having the authority to facilitate the issue and control the flow of currency in our country, which also forms an important part of our economic structure. RBI prints the paper currency, however, the coins are minted by the Government of India. But the handling and the distribution all is managed by Reserve Bank of India. Also, RBI keeps on updating the security features in currency so that any kind of fake currency or counterfeiting of notes can be avoided. Development role. So development role inculcates that how RBI, Reserve Bank of India, looks after the development of money market as well as the banks of India, so that the functioning, the ease can be more. Banker to government. Now, banker to government means that RBI serves as a banker to the government by carrying out country's financial transactions efficiently. Now, if the account of payments and receipts has to be maintained, the government maintains that with the Reserve Bank of India, and that's why RBI is also referred as banker to government. It is also called as banker to bank because in a way you can understand, like when you are in need of money, you go to bank. In the same way, if commercial banks are in need of money, they go to RBI, that is Reserve Bank of India, and that's why it is called banker to bank. So it works as bankers bank in a way that commercial banks hold their account in RBI, they deposit their money or borrows money as and when required on the prevailing interest rate. Role of RBI in inflation control. So RBI also tries to control inflation in the economy by making certain changes in the monetary policies. They formulate monetary policy as well. Okay. RBI is also considered as manager of foreign reserve because it regulates the foreign exchange transactions. It tries to facilitate foreign trade in terms of import and export and maintains certain forex reserve which can be used in any situation of emergency. Also to deal with foreign currencies for importing certain necessities or any kind of items which are not available domestically. So foreign reserve is also maintained. Regulations of banking system. Obviously, RBI is the one who is regulating the banking system of our country. Monetary authority of RBI. So we talked about how RBI is in power of controlling the inflation in the economy and how RBI uses monetary policy for the same. So here we would be looking after certain tools which are bank rate, repo rate, reverse repo rate, cash reserve ratio, statutory liquidity ratio, and how RBI tries to control these rates in our economy. So starting with the bank rate. It is the interest rate that is charged by RBI on long-term borrowings by commercial banks. So as I mentioned that when bank is in need of borrowing money, banks goes to RBI. So when commercial banks are taking loans for long term, RBI charges certain interest rate which is referred as bank rate. Now this bank rate can be controlled by RBI in order to control the money flow in the economy as well. Repo rate. It is a rate charged by RBI while lending money to commercial banks for a shorter time period. So we talked about bank rate where commercial banks borrows money from RBI, but that's for a longer time period. However, repo rate is for shorter time period. So when commercial banks are borrowing money from RBI for a shorter time period of less than 90 days, the rate that is charged by RBI on those banks is referred as repo rate. Now again, these monetary tools are controlled by RBI by increasing or decreasing the rate to control the money flow in the economy. Coming to reverse repo rate. Reverse repo rate is the interest rate charged by commercial banks on RBI for borrowing money. So it may happen that certain times RBI is in need of money, and in that case RBI goes to the commercial banks. So reverse repo rate is the rate that is charged by commercial banks on RBI for borrowing money. Now you also need to consider that again this borrowing is usually for a shorter time period, and sometimes it is also intentionally done by RBI to reduce the liquidity with the commercial banks and in ways to control the money supply in the economy. Now let's come to this cash reserve ratio. So cash reserve ratio indicates the certain percentage of deposit that needs to be kept as reserve in RBI by the commercial banks. It is also obligatory and mandatory. The commercial banks have to keep these reserves as a deposit with the RBI. Okay, and these reserves are referred as cash reserve ratio. If you want to because these rates keep on changing, you once go through the current rate, the current bank rate, the current repo rate, reverse repo rate, cash reserve ratio and SLR. You might get one or two questions from that also, so please go through the current rate that is prevailing in the market related to these. SLR, statutory liquidity ratio. It is proportion of net demand and time liabilities that is mandated to be maintained as liquid reserve, usually in the form of cash and gold reserve. So the difference that you can observe over here, in cash reserve ratio, commercial banks were keeping a deposit in form of cash with the RBI. Here the commercial banks are keeping deposit in forms of cash as well as gold with the RBI, and both these reserves has to be kept mandatorily by commercial banks with the RBI. This is done to avoid any kind of shortage of money which may impact the public in large. Now let's come to SEBI. Securities and Exchange Board of India. It is a regulatory authority for all the capital market players, facilitating efficient and smooth working of the securities market by taking care of issuer of securities, investor and financial intermediaries. Okay, SEBI, Securities and Exchange Board of India, is the regulatory authority of the capital market. So all the players who are involved, whether it is intermediary, whether it is investor, whether it is any financial player, all those players comes under the control of SEBI. So it may be banks, financial institutions, the customers, the investors, the brokers, the agents, all are regulated by SEBI. The major objective of SEBI covers protection to investors from unfair trade practices. So obviously, like any other regulatory authority, SEBI has made certain disclosures, certain code of conduct, certain norms, rules and regulations, restrictions that need to be followed by all those players who are involved in it, so that any kind of unfair trade practices can be avoided, any kind of malpractices can be avoided, and fair and proper functioning can be inculcated in the market. Functions of SEBI can be divided into three major categories: protective function, regulatory function, and development functions. So under protective function, SEBI focuses on preventing any kind of insider trading, it's not inside trading, it would be insider trading, checking price rigging. So insider trading is one when the people who are involved in these financial capital market, they try to disclose certain information which may manipulate the market in a wrong way, and thus that need to be avoided so that fair practices can be continued. And that's the basis of the financial market, that fair practices, equal opportunities, and no manipulations of the market need to be done to gain profit. Coming to regulatory function, registration of brokers, sub-broker, merchant bankers, register and regulate credit rating agencies, that is CRAs. So all those players who are involved in the capital market, whether it is broker, agents, bankers, credit rating agencies, all need to get registered. Development functions: promotion of fair trading and reduction of malpractices, encouraging people in investing in stock market by making people more aware, more knowledgeable, and bringing out the transparency in the market so that the trust can be inculcated among people to invest in the market for the growth of the economy. Now let's come to IRDAI. IRDAI stands for Insurance Regulatory and Development Authority of India. It was constituted under IRDA Act 1999. Okay. It was set up in 2000 as an autonomous body to regulate and develop the business of insurance and reinsurance sector in India. Reinsurance, many of you must not be aware about it. So the insurance companies also get insurance done by another company, and that company is referred as reinsurance, who provides insurance to the insurance companies, because the risk is also involved not just onto the people but also to the insurance companies, because they are handling money of a lot of people, and in any uncertain events, if insurance company has to suffer, it goes to the reinsurance company, it get itself insured so that the burden can be reduced. IRDA is the controlling and regulatory apex body in the country for insurance sector. So you must, I think the questions from this regulatory bodies would be quite simpler, and you need to remember in a way that if if it is asked that which is the regulatory authority controlling insurance sector in country, you must be knowing about that it is IRDAI, it is Insurance Regulatory Development Authority of India. In the similar way, for controlling banks, for the capital market, etc., you need to be aware about that. So IRDA, Insurance Regulatory Development Authority of India, is looking after the insurance market, where the main objectives are like to promote the interest and right of the policyholders, to promote and monitor the growth of the insurance industry, to prevent any kind of fraud and mis-selling of insurance product, to bring transparency and proper code of conduct in financial market dealing with insurance. So as we in previous slide we look after that how SEBI was maintaining the control, was promoting the growth of the industry, bringing transparency in the capital market. The same applies, the same objective is there with the IRDAI, but the market that is being referred over here is the insurance market. So again, the regulatory authorities are having the same kind of objective, just they are made for different markets where they can exercise their control. Functions of IRDAI: issuing the registration certificates to insurance companies and regulate them, protect the interest of policyholder, provide licenses to insurance intermediaries like agents and brokers after stating that required qualifications and guidelines for code of conduct, promote and regulate professional organizations related to insurance to enhance the development of sector, regulate and supervise the premium rates and terms of insurance policies. It is pretty much self understandable, like whatever I have mentioned over here in these slides, it is quite in simpler manner. I have tried to put it over here so that you can get an understanding by going through the lines only, that what exactly is the functions of these regulatory authorities, what exactly is the objective of these regulatory authorities. Coming to PFRDA, that is Pension Fund and Regulatory Development Authority of India. Now, this particular authority is looking after the pension market. It was established in 23rd August 2003 by Government of India, headquartered in New Delhi, India. It develops and regulates the pension sector in India. It administers and regulates the NPS and also administer Atal Pension Yojana. So these are just two examples given over here. Any system that is related to pension, any scheme that is related to pension is administered and regulated by PFRDA. The National Pension System was launched in Jan 2004 with an aim to provide retirement income to all citizens. So there are certain schemes which is provided by government and which is regulated by PFRDA for the proper functioning and all. The objective of NPS is to set up pension reforms and inculcate the habit of saving for retirement among the citizens. Coming to functions of PFRDA: regulate NPS and pension schemes to which PFRDA Act applies. It establish, develop and regulate pension funds. It protect the interest of pension fund subscribers. So those are the peoples who are investing their money in these kind of pension fund. Their interest protection again is the responsibility of PFRDA. Register and regulate intermediaries who are involved, approve schemes, terms and condition, and laying down norms for management. So these intermediaries, they can be any financial institution, it can be any bank who is providing these pension funds. Settle disputes among intermediaries and also between intermediaries and subscribers. So if there is any kind of dispute between the person who is investing their money in these pension fund as well as the intermediaries who are providing these funds, so that disputes can also be settled down. Coming to AMFI, that is Association of Mutual Funds in India. Association of Mutual Funds in India is association of all registered asset management companies. It is an industry body that has been created to promote the interest of mutual fund industry. Okay, let me make this clear to you that I'm not covering these regulatory authorities in detail. I'm just trying to give you a gist about all these through the presentation so that you can get the basic idea that can be useful in the exam. If you want to learn deeply about these, ask me in comment. I will provide you different videos that I have uploaded related to RBI, SEBI, AMFI. All these I have covered in different videos, so I would be providing you the link if you feel the need of the same. But for now, you need to focus that you have to get a just idea about all the regulatory authorities who are controlling different financial market components. So if you as an investment advisor are advising on certain pensions, certain insurance, certain shares or certain mutual funds, you need to know that who is the regulatory authority controlling these different markets, these different financial assets that are being circulated in these markets. So AMFI is the Association of Asset Management Companies. Obviously, we can understand that AMFI is a self-regulatory organization that has been created and that has been created to promote the interest of the mutual funds industry. And mutual fund is one of the fastest growing industry at today's time. It has been the favorite of the investors because it has been a quite lucrative option, because it is providing with different kind of funds, different kind of funds which is suitable for different risk appetite, different return expectations, and as well as diverse customers. So it is one of the most fastest growing industry. The role and functions of AMFI are: interact and represent to SEBI, RBI and government on all matters related to mutual fund industry, and ensure that AMC, sponsors, trustees, custodians, RTAs, all other to rules and regulations for financial market. So these all sponsors, trustees and all, they are the major players of the mutual fund industry. I have also made a playlist on NISM mutual fund distributors. So if in any way you are interested in clearing those certifications of NISM mutual fund investor examination, you can go through that playlist, and I can make you sure that you would be able to clear your exam, because I have got really good comments where the students have learned through those NISM mutual fund certification and they have cleared their exams successfully with really good scores. So if you want, you can ask me in comment. I will give you the link to the NISM mutual fund distributors playlist, and you can go through all those videos as well. Even if you want to get an idea about these topics in details related to mutual fund, you can go through those videos. It defines code of conduct to be followed by AMCs and other parties involved in mutual fund activities. This helps in maintaining high professional and ethical standard in all areas of operation of mutual fund industry. So AMFI is the one who is regulating or looking after the mutual funds in the India and the players who are involved in this particular industry. Role and function of AMFI. A major role of AMFI involves the registration of mutual fund distributors. So till now we have seen how registration is very much important. Even if we talk about the stockbrokers, they are registered under SEBI. When we talk about the pension fund, PFRDA, that also needs registration to be done, and thus registration plays an important part. For insurance all agents also, they need to be registered through IRDAI. So registration is pretty much important to provide an identity whether the player who is whether the agent or the broker or the advisor who is giving you advice or recommending you something is having that valuable registration, having that authority to give you recommendations or not. So in the similar way, AMFI also involves registration of mutual fund distributors. Mutual fund distributors are the people who are selling these mutual funds schemes to the customers, and they are allotted with AMFI registration number, that is ARN, which is mandatory if you want to become a mutual fund distributor. AMFI helps in protecting the interest of investors and takes disciplinary action for violation of code of conduct, develops a cadre of well-trained agents and distributors to implement a training program and certification. Also, you must have observed that these regulatory bodies, they also work in the field of educating and imparting knowledge to the customers, to the investors, to the intermediaries, to the agents or the distributors who are involved, so that there can be a good financial knowledge if the people are there in this financial market. Conduct nationwide investor awareness program to promote and enhance knowledge related to the concepts and working of mutual funds. Now let's come to money laundering. Money laundering is the process of concealing the origin of money obtained from illegitimate sources by passing it through complex sequence of financial transactions and making it appear to be originated from legal activity. So you as an investment advisor, you must be you must be aware about the client's money, from where the client's money is being originated, and so that you don't get into any legal matter. So you must have a little bit idea about money laundering. So there are many people who try to gain money, who try to earn money through illegal sources. Now these illegal sources could be illegal arms sales, terrorism funding, smuggling, drug trafficking, insider trading, fraud schemes, bribery, etc. Now, these illegal activities are prohibited by law. Even after that, if some people are earning money through these illegal activities, they can be put under illegal charges, they can be asked to pay penalty, they can be provided with imprisonment. So all these consequences, they want to hide and avoid these consequences of getting into legal matters, and for that reason they try to hide the fact that their money has been originated from illegal sources. They try to present a different picture, that their money has been originated from a legal source. Now how do they do it? This is the whole idea about money laundering. Laundering means cleaning, and here the people who are gaining money through illegal sources, they are trying to clean their money, they are trying to clean their dirty money. Okay, in simpler terms, money laundering means cleaning of dirty money. Now, this can be done by various ways, which we don't need to focus over here. But if you want a separate video, you can ask me in comment. I have already made a video on money laundering. I will be providing the link to that video, where you can get in detail the idea about how people do this money laundering, how they make this complex sequence of financial transactions, etc. So you can learn in that video as well. For now, let me just explain you in simpler terms with few examples, that many people, they have gained a lot of amount from illegal transactions. What they do, they convert that amount in small denominations, and they deposit their money with different banks in the country as well as outside the country, so that if the amounts are in smaller, if there are smaller amounts deposited with different banks won't be focusing much, because they would be thinking like, anyways it's a smaller amount, it won't come in focus so much. So they try to make small denominations of a larger money, and place it with different domestic banks as well as the offshore foreign banks as well. Okay, in this way they are trying to keep the money out of the focus from one particular area. And also sometimes they try to donate some of the money in charities or for some good purposes, so that so that to avoid the concentration of the government or the legal authorities from the material facts. Prevention of money laundering. So FATF is Financial Action Task Force. It was formed in 1989 by G7 countries to develop and ensure an international response to combat money laundering. So money laundering is not just a problem of our country, it's the whole world dealing with it, where the people are trying to gain money through illegal sources, and that needs to be combated. And that's why this Financial Action Task Force was formed in the year 1989, where 7 countries came into collaboration, and the objective was to set certain standards and promote effective implementation of legal, regulatory, and operational measures for combating money laundering. So many rules and regulations were set to identify money, the source of money, from where it is being originated, what could be the repercussions, what could be the penalties that has to be provided, how to do a proper due diligence documentations to understand, to avoid this kind of misuse of banking or financial system by these people who are involved in illegal businesses. Prevention of Money Laundering Act 2002. This act was passed to stop money laundering and punish those involved directly or indirectly in illegal activities. As per this act, whoever commits money laundering shall be punishable with imprisonment of about 3 to 10 years, and shall also be liable to pay Fine. So these are two of the regulatory authorities which are there to avoid any kind of money laundering. So at the global international level, it is Financial Action Task Force. Then there is this PMLA, Prevention of Money Laundering Act. Now let's have a look at the Investor Complaint Redressal System. First one is CORDS, that is SEBI Complaint Redress System. It is a centralized web-based system for lodging and tracking investor complaints against any market intermediary that is registered with SEBI. Okay, so if you as an investor you want to make a complaint, if you are not satisfied or if you have been through any malpractices, you need to make a complaint, and thus this websites has been provided to you. SCORS is a SEBI complaint redress system where you can lodge your complaint, where you can track your complaint, and it is just to make it easier for the investors. Integrated Grievance Management System IGMS is an online grievance redressal mechanism launched by IRDAI. So as this was related to the capital market registered with SEBI, this is related to insurance market launched by IRDAI, that is Insurance Regulatory Development Authority of India. IGMS. So if you have any complaints related to the insurance market, related to the players involved in insurance market like insurers, brokers, intermediaries, you can lodge a complaint through this IGMS, which is an online grievance redressal system. Then there is CGMS, that is Central Grievance Management System. It is a multi-layered grievance redressal mechanism launched by NPS, that is National Pension System. Now again, as it was for capital market, as this one was for insurance market, this one is for the pensions market. So if you have any complaints related to the player involved in the pensions market, you can lodge and file your complaint online through CGMS, that is Central Grievance Management System. Customers of bank who face any kind of deficiency of service can apply to the banking ombudsman. Okay, so this is Banking Ombudsman scheme of the RBI is the one looking after the complaints of the people, the customers who are facing difficulties from any bank or any player involved in this banking system. So you might get a question from it. You need to consider that for which market, which complaint system is being provided. Now quickly attempt these chapter end questions. So starting with question 1, which of the following persons is expected to comply with registration requirement under SEBI? Investment Advisors Regulations 2013. So option A is fund manager of an AMC. Option B is a distributor of a mutual fund who only receives commissions from the AMC. Option C, an investment advisor who charges advisory fees to the investors. Option D, a chartered accountant practicing his profession. Choose the correct option. And the right answer is option C. Moving to question 2, the minimum tangible assets to be maintained by an individual investment advisor are rupees. Option A 1 lakh, option B 25 lakh, option C 5 lakh, option D 10 lakh. Choose the correct option. And the right answer is option A 1 lakh. Coming to question number 3, registration and regulation of securities market intermediaries is the function of option A AMFI, option B SEBI, option C PFRDA, option D SRO. Choose the correct option. And the right answer is option B SEBI. Coming to the last question, a person who has a complaint against an insurance company must lodge his complaint with option A SCORS, option B CGMS, option C IGMS, option D RBI. Choose the correct option. And the right answer is option C IGMS. Thank you for watching.